Hi everyone, welcome back. It's the end of week 3 for our BIB 314 class, Jesus and the Christian Community. I've enjoyed working through the assignments over the first couple of weeks. We'll continue with that grading and give you guys feedback. But overall, I've just been really delighted to see how you're interacting with each other and with the material. And for those of you that have had some specific questions or issues with the Moodle site, we've communicated by email, and I think for the most part that's going really well. But as I do this brief intro for week 4, one of the things that I know is not a part of the course formally, and it's not part of our syllabus, so it won't be for grading or credit or anything like that. But I'd like to create an opportunity where we have a synchronous meeting. And what that means is we actually have a live chance to chat by video about any of the things that may have come up so far in the class. So we're about halfway done. Just 3 weeks till Christmas now. That's hard to believe. But I'm going to use something called Adobe Connect and try to set up a meeting for anyone in our class who's interested. So you can be on the lookout for that email invitation, probably come in the next day or two, and we'll try to set aside some time that works for as many people as possible. And in the meantime, if you know that you want to participate in that and you have some questions that it could be about a specific assignment, but it could be more generally just about the way in which you're processing the material that we're going through to encounter the life of Jesus and his significance. You can be thinking about that. You could even email me some of those questions ahead of time after you've seen this video, and as you're getting ready for week 4, feel free to shoot me some questions or comments that you may have. But let me just give you a brief overview, and just as well to let you know there won't be another teaching video in week 4 from me. There's some really great material throughout this 4th week. There are a couple of teaching videos a little later on, and then there's also a movie that you watch this week. Lots of reading, lots of writing, and this is a writing intensive course, so you've probably figured that out by now. But there's lots going on, so you don't need another video from me. Let me just give you a brief orientation, remind us of where we've been and where we're headed. So when we first started, we were just asking some basic questions about how do we even come to terms with the person of Jesus in a meaningful way. And we suggested 3 worlds that kind of inform our understanding. The literary world, those are the ancient texts that we have. The historical world, that's actually the data that we have about what happened, what was going on, what the social dynamics were like. And then the contemporary world. How do we take all of that information and hear it in our context and make sense of it? And then possibly, especially if we're committed to a faith in Jesus, how do we apply that to our lives? So that's kind of where we've been initially. And then in the second week, we looked at the key moments in Jesus' early ministry that really kind of set the groundwork for what kind of person or figure we might be dealing with in the baptism and the temptation of Jesus. And then we tried to come to terms over this past week with Jesus' teaching, and particularly with the Gospel of Matthew's Sermon on the Mount. And you may recall in some of the things that you've read, especially if you've been reading Craybill's book on the Upside Down Kingdom, that the Sermon on the Mount is really the core of Jesus' teaching that Anabaptist Christians have historically focused on. And they've essentially said, these are the most important things that Jesus said as Matthew remembers them. And we kind of build our theology and our belief from that core. In other words, Anabaptists have said there are some things in Scripture that are actually more central than other things. And we just start with Jesus, the person, and his teachings in the Sermon on the Mount. So that's kind of where we've been. And now we try to put some of that information together and join Matthew, especially in Matthew chapter 16, and also especially in how Matthew wrestles with a section of the book of Isaiah called the Servant Songs. That's the Old Testament prophet Isaiah, from about chapters 40 to about 55. In that section of 15 or 16 chapters, there are several lengthy descriptions of the Messiah as someone who would have to suffer. And that's unusual in early Jewish theology and in the thinking of the Old Testament. But that unusual thinking mapped really well onto what people actually saw happening in the life of Jesus. And Matthew wrestles with that. So that's what really this section is going to be about. We're going to look at how the life of Jesus, after his teaching and the early parts of his life, how does his life come to a climax or a culmination? How do we handle what Christians have historically called the passion, which is the death or the suffering, and then the death and burial of Jesus. And then that leads us obviously to consider his ascension as well. So a couple of things about the logistics of this week. Here's what you should expect. First, there's going to be a bit of a longer paper up front, and that has a pretty detailed description in both the syllabus and on the Moodle site. It's about a 3 to 4 page paper. And if you think 250 to 300 words a page, you're probably in the ballpark for how long that's going to be. And you'll want to notice that we're asking that it be written in APA style. And you can certainly find help for that either on FPU's Hebert Library website or online for APA style guidelines. Then there's going to be a bunch of worksheets and discussions that you work through, and then the primary teaching is going to be around Isaiah's suffering servant and how Matthew presents Jesus as a Messiah who has to suffer and die. And as we look at Matthew 16, we're going to see that that's one of the key elements of the life of Jesus that his disciples did not find easy to handle or to process or to think through. And then near the end of this, and it's important that we emphasize the suffering of Jesus, because one of the things about Jesus that the earliest Anabaptist Christians about 500 years ago really gravitated toward was the suffering of Jesus. And the reason they gravitated toward it, because that's what they were experiencing as people who had a certain set of convictions. They were persecuted, they were marginalized, they were hunted down in some cases by governing authorities and by local government structures that were sometimes even funded by more official state church forces. So Anabaptists have a particular history, and they really identify with the suffering of Jesus, which is described by Matthew, and Matthew bases his descriptions on the book of Isaiah, chapters 40 to 55. So that's essentially what week 4 is going to be about. The final write-up is an ETS criterion assignment, and you'll see that again on the Moodle site, and that capability has been uploaded to Criterion. So I look forward to seeing some of your responses to the video on Anabaptists, the teaching on the suffering of Jesus, the readings from Craybill's text. This will be a key part of your reflections this week, chapters 8, 9, and 10. And I look forward to connecting with you further. As always, don't hesitate to email me any questions you have. And if you want to join a live or synchronous chat or conversation about where we've gotten to the course so far, please be thinking about some of the things you want to talk about, and look for that invitation. It'll give you a link and instructions. I'll try to do that within the next couple of days. So hopefully by Tuesday of week 4, you'll be hearing from me on that. Take care. We'll talk to you soon.